We're back at it, talking all things AI, and sounds like you've had a busy weekend or last few days kicking around some things. Maybe you want to tell us about what you found out.
Of course, yeah. It feels like at this point in time, things have coalesced to a point where I just want to get work done. And I'm not sure if I have anything new to share. I apologize, but I can talk about a little bit about some of the work that I was doing at least. So
Yeah.
I think I've standardized on Claude Code as being my preferred tool, and it's not the cheapest, but it certainly does give me results that I think are handy. And that is, to me at least, it feels like a third hand. When it becomes something that is like that, it feels like I don't want to code any other way. It's why would I do this with two hands when I know I've got a third out there? Maybe it's at 1.1 times the speed of usual, so 10% increase. Maybe I'm working at double speed. Heck, even sometimes it feels like I'm working at half speed, but at least I'm learning. It feels like I don't want to code any other way, which is like a really dangerous situation to be in. I know we
Well,
had an outage a couple months back where some of the AI providers went down. I need to be able to use my brain. I can't be relying on the internet. That
uh,
this is where I've
uh,
landed.
and let me throw this out there. I have a yard right now that is basically weed free, and it is because a tool, and
Ah.
AI is a tool, and it just made life so much easier. I can walk around without bending over, and I like step on this thing and then pull it back, and it pulls the weed out from the root in a very satisfying snap. That tool changed what pulling weeds means to me. And now I'm really good at it. I do it all the time. Maybe you just have to squint a certain way, but it's similar for me anyway.
I totally hear you. So a lot of what I was working on this weekend was test-driven development, and I'm really bad at TDD. Writing tests, defining the test, and I've mentioned this one before, but adding them to a pre-commit hook. So before I commit to Git and just local Git, I'm still a little bit nervous based on my YOLO experience. So still using local Git, but as I commit to a local Git repository, it will run these commands and ensure the tests are passed. And it does feel like there's no better way for me to at least deal with Claude Code, and I'm using Sonnet 4, but no better way for me to deal with an LLM agent in coding than a test-driven approach. So the idea I had in mind is I want to go a little bit more meta. If you and I are making a bunch of apps all the time, what is the next level? Like, can we get into a way of ensuring that every app that we create has monitoring telemetry? It could be open telemetry, what have you. Is it a way that we ensure that security is taken care of? Or is it something where you just go through and you've got a certain methodology to ensure that a project is like that? So in my smart brain, I guess on Friday afternoon, I decided, hey, what if I just made a lovable clone? And the just is key here because the just often belies like a lot of work. It seems very simple. You'll see these YouTube videos where someone takes a screenshot of something and says, hey, I'm just going to make a lovable clone or a bolt clone or what have you. And in fact, I did fall prey to one of these YouTube videos where they decided to recreate Lovable in Claude, and it took them hours. I think it took them 4 hours, so it wasn't trivial at all. And, and after watching the video, I realized like this is not a simple thing to approach. But there are some things in here that I can play around with. So I want to do it in Kubernetes and monitor it and things like that. And listen, I've got Claude Code up here. I'm not going to go through all of it. The primary learning, I think, from myself, at least, was that test-driven approach. So defining those tests. And I'll quickly go into what that looks like here. So it's in the GitHub folder. And okay, so in these GitHub workflows, we could do things like there's a security scan in here, for example. So it would run through this every time it's going through one of the Git commits. And it will do things like make sure that there's no keys being exposed or making sure that we're using our keys to test, but essentially going through and writing these tests. But this is just one of many things that happen in this repo. So I tried to use Jujitsu, for example, halfway through. Don't introduce like a new Git tool. That was a bad idea. You can tell it was Friday night. I was trying new things. Decided to go down the Helm path, decided to go down the local Docker compose path. Writing docs as I went along is good, but can also be fodder because then you have to update the docs. Anyway, there's a bunch of things done in here. Like I wrote a new VS Code extension, which half works, for example, but just going through things and just essentially throwing spaghetti at the wall. The problem I'd say, or the cautionary tale here is that a lot of the models I found are really good at generating code. So exploding a project to a big size. The problem that you're then going to have is going in after and taking the things that are important and getting rid of all the fluff, which is what I've got to do now on a Monday morning is decide like, do we want Docker Compose? Do we want Kubernetes? I played around with Kubernetes in Docker or kind, which was pretty cool. I think I could show that here. So basically just setting up a cluster as I went. All right, so we had a vibe coded cluster. And what I ended up standardizing is code server. So it's essentially VS Code in the browser. And then just figuring out ways, do I need storage in a backend, a Postgres database? And these are some of the clusters that I made that had monitoring on them. You can see the running nodes. Some of them have ports available. Once it's ready, I will show off what I've actually got in terms of working code. But for now, the main thing that I can say is like when you're making this type of big process, one of the things I found going through was actually having a PRD. In this case, it's just called Claude Prompt, but I had Claude help me create a PRD. And then from that PRD, I was able to go from there. Sorry, I think I just stopped screen sharing, but basically, essentially describing the project and then going through that description over and over again as you're compacting your context. I mentioned this to one of our coworkers, Rick, last week, but it feels like a lot of the process these days is not prompt engineering, but more context engineering. So if you're on a long running process, making sure that you're massaging what's in that context window for the LLM as it's looking at your code in order to guide it towards the solution or guide it towards many possible solutions that might be good outcomes for you. So a lot of things to say, but basically what I tried to do is create a lovable replacement. It seemed like a small thing until I watched a YouTube video, realized it wasn't. Went down this path anyway because I figured I could learn some things. I did. The cautionary tale here would be to make sure that you stick to your PRD as you're going through, rinse, repeat, and massage it if you need to, make it smaller, bigger as you add things to it. You can ask the LLM to update it as you go, but essentially going back to that point and helping you. Not really tips and tricks for Claude Code, but essentially it's super handy. I've been using it a lot, and I feel like these are things that have helped me. Perhaps they can help you as well.
Awesome. Yeah. As somebody who uses Lovable probably every day, I will say
Mm,
that that is, and I love it. I've been like building some really fun stuff. To try to build that is very ambitious. So
absolutely.
kudos to you. But yeah, it's a very challenging project. Did you start with a blank page on that project, or did you come to Claude with a prompt, or what's the genesis? I guess maybe a little bit of how you, because it can get pricey and all that stuff. But sometimes the project may have started somewhere else. Does that happen
Ye-
here?
Yeah, so it definitely started in Claude. I was just going through my history here. So I had a PRD essentially. So I said, please create a PRD for a lovable slash bolt.diy clone. So open source Bolt and Lovable. Let's look at the features that they've got. And let's
Mm-hmm.
think about an MIT licensed piece of software that we could use that would be similar to both of those. So I told it to make sure the licenses are MIT, BSD, and Apache compatible. I realize that there are others, but those are the ones I know off the top of my head
Mm-hmm.
in order to make sure once I get down this path, I don't have to massage the licenses later because that can be a problem as well as pulling things out. But yeah, I can share that PRD if that's handy. One second here. I've got that.
No, well, not
Okay.
necessarily.
Okay.
I was just curious if the PRD and all that came first. Like sometimes
Yes.
I think when I go to Claude, and maybe this is just because I'm aware of its costs, similar to Lovable, like I don't want to just come over there and just like spitball
It,
a ton
it,
because that can add
it,
up.
you want to have your ingredients like all cut or prepped
Yeah.
before you start the cooking show? I absolutely just start it raw. I think I started in maybe the staging because I started in
Okay.
Claude Code Desktop as opposed to Claude Desktop, not as opposed to Claude Code Desktop. But I started in Claude Desktop, made the PRD, and then took that PRD and used it in Claude Code. To be fair, I could have made the PRD in Claude Code. I think it's just that a lot of times, as we were mentioning, I think the pre-show about Perplexity and other tools, is that it feels like it's that tool that I want to reach for when I'm trying to find out something as opposed to find something. And it does feel to me like Claude or Perplexity or what have you is that engine now. Is the tool that I'm reaching for in order to explain something or make my ideas a little bit better, put some icing on my cake, as it were, before I hand it back to Claude Code. Because I realize that when that PRD is fully formed, you get a lot better results from the first shot. And it's a lot less iteration in terms of actually describing what you need to get done as opposed to getting what you need done.
Cool. Well, thanks as always for showing us a few things that you've picked up along the way. We can amplify that on to all of our friends and colleagues. So thanks, Ryan, and we'll see you on the next one.
Sounds good.